Hey guys, welcome, good morning. Frank Victorine. I'm here to talk about a couple of the SkyRC product line. I've got the new 150 Pro all aluminum speed controller. Well, this is the 6.5 turn 1/10 scale sensored / sensorless motor. And I'm also going to take a couple minutes and just talk about the 2150 kV SkyRC motor, along with their Truggy 1950 6-pole 12-slot motor. Personally, I've been racing with this product line for about 4 years now. In terms of durability, raceability, these speed controllers have actually proven to be, and motors have proven to be, a really good value for the dollar. So the first thing that I think I'd like to talk about a little bit today is their new 150 amp Pro Series. I'm just going to pull this thing out. It's an all aluminum speed controller. Obviously this thing is sensored and sensorless. It's 6S capable. God knows I'd be curious to know who would actually want to run one of those things on 6S, because they're way overpowered on 4S, but nevertheless they are capable of it. If you look at the overall build quality, this speed controller is just, man, these things are so nice. So I guess the question that I really want to address in terms of aluminum, why are these speed controllers, why is this new speed controller, why is the case made from aluminum? And so MOSFETs, that's the type of switching device that actually allows you to take low current to high current and basically feed the motors with power. Those things also generate heat, and that anyone that's been in this for a while knows what happens to these things. Generally, you have a hard crash, the fan stops working. Well, then when the fan stops working, the motor gets too hot, or the speed controller gets too hot, and it damages the speed controller. Generally, what I find is that if I have a failed fan and I don't catch it, there's a pretty good chance within the next 1 to 2 weekends I'm putting a new speed controller in it. And it really doesn't even matter what the brand is. That's just something that I see occur on all speed controllers. So the advantage, and I had to ask SkyRC to come out with an aluminum series speed controller about 1.5 years ago, and I don't know that I was instrumental in having them make that change, but I can tell you this, today we've got them. But the real advantage of this speed controller being aluminum is the way that it dissipates heat through the MOSFET. So let's say, for example, you have a fan that goes out, and this thing has way more capacity to pull heat through the MOSFET and prevent from damaging it. So I'm really excited to see how these things perform long term. This is a new product line. I haven't had 6 months or a year to really pound on the things and determine how much more durable they are, but I'm willing to bet that they're much more durable just due to the fact that they're aluminum. So a couple other things that I should mention. In terms of programmability, these things have a Wi-Fi adapter that you can plug directly into them, that then you can link with an app via your Android smartphone, and it allows you to program these things not literally on the fly, and you can do it when the vehicle's running, assuming that you have a good enough Bluetooth capability. So what I'll do is I'll run a couple of poles with a Wi-Fi adapter strapped under the battery, and then I'll have someone change the power settings a little bit so I can get traction under control for that day or whatever I think is going to happen. They have all the brake and advanced timing settings. In terms of programmability, these things are every bit as programmable as a Tekin or a Hobbywing, and they're as durable and they're as smooth. Really, these things are every bit as good for a little bit better deal. So that's what I had to say about that product for today. Well, here's something that I'll mention. You're probably wondering, it's like, well, why in the world do I have this beat up? I mean, man, this thing looks like it has been literally ran through hell and back. I mean, it is rough. This came out of my practice vehicle. I ran this thing for over 1.5 years, and I beat it to the point where the case was missing, and I mean, to the point that it was almost non-functional. It's my practice car, so it's not like I was racing with it. And I just wanted to show you that so you can get an idea of just how durable and reliable this product is. So here's here's another quick talking point. This is yet another speed controller. And what you'll find is the top covers off of it. This is the non-aluminum series. This is the plastic series. And one of the things that I would do that I found that really increased the life of speed controllers in general is that I will pull them apart. I will purchase 100% silicone. And then what I would do is I would actually fill the case and all the electronics with silicone. I let it sit about 3 days so it doesn't react with anything. And then I go ahead and calibrate it and put it together. And the advantages of this is that this stuff is flexible, but yet it's still pretty hard. It transfers heat better than nothing. And that what I have found is by filling my speed controllers full of silicone, I personally have gotten 2 to 3 times the life out of them. Now with that said, when I look at this original speed controller that I had in my practice cart, this did not have silicone in it, and it still managed to live through all of that. Anyhow, guys, so that's the topic on those. A next thing that I'm going to run up to is I'm going to talk about their new Aries Pro V2 1/10 scale brushless motor. This particular wind is a 6.5 turn. I run this in both my EB410, which is the 1/10 scale 4-wheel drive buggy, and I also run it in the little truggy too, the ET410. And I find that the 6.5 turn motor is about the right, it's about the sweet spot. The 5.5s put down power too hard. Sometimes on a loose track condition you end up with some tire spin and they're a little bit harder to drive, and then you end up in a few more crashes, and as the result of that then you don't win as much. So for me personally, I found that the 6.5 motor, again in both the buggy 4-wheel drive and the truck version 1/10 scale, this is actually just a wonderful motor. It does give you the ability to be able to advance the timing up to about 40, well actually 50 degrees, either retard or advance. And the way that advance works is that the more you advance ignition timing with a brushless DC motor, the more the more top speed you get, but the lower the torque curve. So this may sound crazy, but if I have a spot where I think that I'm spinning the tires coming off of a turn, sometimes advancing the timing and then pulling the EPA down on the radio so it produces softer, easier power but has more top, that's a good tuning option. And anyhow, these things are just wicked cool. And that's their new V2 motor. Again, in terms of smoothness, reliability, performance, durability, this product line to me in the last 4 years has proven to be every bit as good as some of the other brands out there, like Tiken, which the majority, heck I'd be inclined to say that 95% of the racers are on the have drank the Tiken Kool-Aid, and not that Tiken's bad. I've raced some Tiken stuff too, and I personally don't have any qualms with Tiken other than the cost to performance ratio. This stuff performs just as good, and it's half the cost. So I would, for me personally, money does matter. And like most racers, I spent a ton of money doing this already. I typically race somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 weeks a month, sometimes all 4 weeks. Worst case scenario, I'm racing 1 time a month, but in most cases, I race just about every weekend, and that's intentional to stay up on the hobby. Anyhow, guys, this is their new Aries Pro motor, which I think is awesome. So next thing coming up, I'd really like to talk about this series of motor. This is their 1/8 scale. These come in 2 different winds. They come in a 2150 wind, and they also come in a 2350 wind. So here are some differences between the 21 and 2350 winds, if you're curious. To me, doing some back-to-back testing, the 2150 actually acts a little bit closer to, man, I wouldn't call it a 1700 Tiken, but I wouldn't call it a 19 either. This thing has about the same top as a Tiken 1900 Gen 2, but has noticeably, and I mean drastically more mid to bottom torque. These things almost make a good truggy motor. The 2150s just have such a crazy torque curve down on the bottom, which is more like a 1700, Blake. So so again, maybe I'll touch on that. What is the correlation between the kV and how a motor makes power? Well, there's a direct correlation between them. The lower the kV, the higher the torque, but the lower the RPM. So as you go up in kV, you're actually pulling power off the bottom and you're putting it on the top and allowing the motor to rev further. That's just the way motors work. So this motor is, on the bottom I'd call it a 1700, on the top I'd call it a 1900. They actually have it labeled as a 2150. I haven't put it on a motor tester and actually tested its actual kV to see where it comes into. You know, granted, well, you could take 10 of these motors, put them on an actual kV tester, and all 10 would test probably 50 RPM or so difference. So not every motor is exactly the same to begin with, but they're close. So the next version of this would be the 2350. Let's talk about personal preference. A lot of guys buy this motor because they think that it's closer to the 1900. What I have found is that I prefer the 2350 kV, and the reason being is that, again, it's smoother off the bottom. This motor puts out, for me, in most track conditions, the torque curve is just a little too steep down on the bottom. The 2350 is much more linear. It's easier to drive on the bottom, and it has what I would call crazy top end. And again, one of the ways that you can tune around with that is just EPA. You know, you gear it where it's right, and then you drop down the percentage of voltage that's actually being dropped down to the speed controller. So if you're 0 to 100, let's say you're 0, you have no voltage to the motor whatsoever. If you're at 100, you have 100% of the battery's voltage going to the motor. And voltage, well, I'll say this also too, I'll just add this. There's a direct correlation between voltage and RPM. In other words, the more voltage, that if you double voltage, you double RPM. So if you make a 20% increase in voltage, you have just made a 20% increase in engine RPM. So the two, and also torque. So you get exponential, or I shouldn't use the word exponential. That's not true. You get the same rate of change based on acceleration as you change voltage. If any of that made any sort of logical sense. So these are also censored or sensorless. The only thing that I do to these motors when I get these things, because most folks aren't going to pull a $50 motor apart and replace the bearings and clean them, and that's just not the types of things that I see people do that are running motors at this price point. So most folks don't service these. Me personally, when I get them in, I back the screws up a little bit, I drip some super glue down into the threads, and then I tighten the screw down. And I do that on both ends of the front bell and the rear bell. And the reason that I do that is that if these screws start to back themselves out a little bit, and let's say you're at Psycho Nitro or one of the real big events and you come up short on, your 50-foot double, and that screw is backed out a little bit, it can tear the end bell completely out of those things. And again, that doesn't matter. When I look at the case, the quality of the case, it's every bit as good as the competition. That can occur with any motor. So I do that initially just to make damn sure this thing doesn't fail in a race. Okay, so that's this motor.